Welcome to For Book Lovers Only Live Radio, where we discuss amazing books written by talented authors. For Book Lovers Only Live Radio is a proud member of the Village Connector Media Network. If you love books, we have a home for you. Now time for your host and chief book lover, Rob Brown.
Hello, book lovers and book fans. This is For Book Lovers Only Live Radio, where if you love books, we have a home for you. My name is Rob Brown, your internet radio host and chief book lover. As always, we have a wonderful show lined up for you today. We are delighted to welcome in our studios Jeannette DiLouie, who is truly the definition of multi-talented, and we'll be spending time with her today. But first, I want to take a moment to thank our most recent call-out guest and speaker, author, and coach, Marty Reep, author of Believe, Do, and Follow Through, and Trevor and the Dark Rider. Both of Marty's books are available on our website at www.forbookloversonly.com. Now, while you're on our site to purchase a copy of Marty's books, please join our Book Lovers Club. It's absolutely free. All you have to do is submit your name and email address, and you're in. We'll keep you posted about new books, authors, and other events going on in the book lovers world, and you will even receive a free gift for joining, so don't wait. Join today. A little information about some upcoming book fairs. The first annual Detroit Festival of Books is going on actually today, July 16th from 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. So it's actually taking place right now as I am speaking. But at the very least, I wanted our book lovers to know about this event for next year. It is at Eastern Market, Shed 5, located at 2801 Russell Street in Detroit, Michigan. It was organized by the Book Club of Detroit. This event is free. It is the first ever used and rare book festival in the Motor City, and its mission is to foster a stronger love and appreciation of books for the greater Detroit residents. Please visit DetroitBookFest.com / for more information. Next, we have the 2017 Hong Kong Book Fair. This will be Wednesday, July 19th to Tuesday, July 25th. This wonderful event is organized by the Hong Kong Trade Development Council and is in its 27th year, attracting more and more book lovers every year. The theme of this year's book fair is Reading the World, People, Places, and Passions. I really like that. There will be diverse cultural activities and exhibits involving children's and teens books, religious and spirituality books, along with ebooks, audio-visual learning aids, and other multimedia products. Among the event speakers will be Sarah Wheeler, Cedric Fernandez, and Tim Moore. Tickets are 25 Hong Kong dollars for adults and 10 Hong Kong dollars for children. Visit the website address listed on your screen for more details. And now time for today's guest. She is the author of 10 novels across 4 genres and counting. Let me repeat. She is the author of 10 novels across 4 genres. Remember earlier that I had mentioned that our guest today is multi-talented? Well, that's what I meant. Her fairy tale series in particular puts a fascinating sci-fi twist on a classic fantasy concept that's bound to engage readers across the board. That active adventure begins with Not So Human and ends with Book 5, Flights of Fancy, due out later this year. An avid reader and writer, she also runs Innovative Editing, a full-service editorial business that focuses especially on helping other writers earn their own book writing credentials. And I know firsthand the quality of her work because she is editing my first book, No Business Cards Allowed, so she definitely has her work cut out for her. Her name is Jeannette DiLouie. Jeannette, welcome to For Book Lovers Only Live Radio.
Thank you so much. It's great to be here.
Absolutely. So you and I had spoken many times before in the past, and finally we're able to meet. I'm really excited that you're in our studios. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Okay. Let's see. I was an English major in college, which I'll go into more detail about that later, I'm sure. Born in New Jersey. Moved to Lancaster, Pennsylvania when I was about 7 years old, grew up there, and then moved down here for my first out-of-college real job experience. Lived here in Baltimore, Maryland for 9.5 years, and I'm right back in Lancaster now.
Okay. In Lancaster, that's Dutch country with the Amish and the Mennonites.
Yes, yep, that is what it is known for, Amish all the way.
How is it like living there?
You know what? That really depends on what time period we're talking about. When I first moved there, oh dear, like 25 years ago now, it was very, very rural. And honestly, as a Jersey girl, I was rather not impressed with it.
Right.
But it is getting so much more busy and industrialized, and to the point where the traffic is really getting annoying. And really, you don't see many horse and buggies anymore either. I'm rather surprised when I actually see one on the road, and back in the day, that used to be a common occurrence.
Now, that's interesting that you mentioned it. You say it's getting busier. I actually, when I first started writing my book, and I wanted to do basically a writing retreat. I wanted to go to a place that was pretty quiet, where I was able to concentrate, and I chose Dutch country. This was January of 2016, and I basically holed myself up in a hotel room and wrote like 10,000 words in a weekend. And I remember going to Lancaster, Pennsylvania, because I was under the impression that it was a very quiet community and that not a lot going on, but you're saying it's getting busier. It
is getting busier. They are just building new complexes and housing, lots every other day, it seems. So a lot less farmland and a lot more people now.
I see. It seems like that's just kind of like the way of the world. And obviously, you're an author. I want to talk about the fairy tale series, but first tell me a little bit about how you became an author.
Okay, so I started writing, I guess my very first book was written when I was 6 years old. I can't say that it was very good or creative. But at the time, I really thought that it was.
Right.
I was very impressed with myself. But, that just spurred a love of writing in me in general. And from that day forward, I just knew that I was going to be a published author. That was my goal in life. Admittedly, sometimes I also thought I was going to be a princess or an astronaut or a cowgirl or something, but author never changed for me. And so, the years went by and I wrote a little bit more here and there. I think I finished my very first official novel-length manuscript when I was 17 or 18. And once again, I thought it was amazing. And now I look back on it, and it is just humiliating. It's so bad. It is so very bad. But, it was a great learning experience for me because, I wrote that. I learned a lot about the writing process, moved on to my very second, novel-length manuscript. And once again, that's never going to be published. But after that, my third one was Not So Human. And so you learn as you go along. I did not actually get self-published until 2015, I want to say. Might have been 2014. But, again, the whole entire time I was learning, I was growing, and I really am happy that I waited as long as I did, because I don't think you're ever a perfect writer, but I do think I'm a very strong writer now, and I'm really happy about my progress there.
Now, when you said you wrote your first book, your first full book at 17, did you have the resources of, let's say, high school English teachers, or were you just like, hey, I'm completely self-taught?
Well, okay, so I was homeschooled. So my mother was my high school English teacher.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
and she is such a bookworm. Oh my word, you should see her house. It is just books absolutely everywhere.
I love her already.
And I mean, don't let her into a bookstore. Barnes & Noble, it's a very, very dangerous situation because she's going to buy more. So, I mean, I would definitely say that I got my love of reading and books in general from my mom. But when it came to the writing process, basically, I just sat down and did it because I loved it.
That's amazing, and those are how, like, the great writers and the great stories, how they start out. You just, hey, I'm just going to go for it. I'm just going to start writing, and let's just see, what happens. So, how did you come up with the Not So Human in the first place? The concept for that book.
That all started because fresh out of college, and this goes back to my English major statement before, little known fact about English majors is nobody actually wants them straight out of college, which I did understand that it would probably be a bit of a difficult time getting a job initially, but I was certain that I would get there eventually, and so out of college, I took one temp job, and then I took another temp job. And this second temp job was just a very interesting, it was an interesting business, it was an interesting place, and it was a very unique environment, shall we say. So honestly, if I was lucky, I might have 15 minutes worth of work to do from 8:30 until 5 o'clock in the evening.
Wow.
Yeah. And for some people, I say that, and they're like, oh, my word, that's my dream job. To me, that was torture. That
Right.
was absolutely horrible. So I spent a lot of time, searching for apartments and stuff to furnish my apartment with when I finally got one. And I also started writing a story about a young woman who was fresh out of college and stuck in a dead-end temp job with coworkers who were very ignorant. And somehow or another, within 2 chapters, it turned into this fantasy story about a Scottish fairy princess who was living in America and hiding with an identity so secret that she didn't even know about it.
Wow. That's really, I mean, it's a very unique concept. I really like the concept of the book. And it's interesting that you took your experience from a temp job and say, hey, I'm going to use this as a book. Did you know that it was going to turn into a 5-story series when you started it?
No, I had no idea whatsoever. There are 2 different kinds of writers out there. There's plotters and pantsers. Plotters are the very organized kind of people who they sit down and they figure out everything that is going to happen
Right.
in their story before they actually start writing. And then a pantser is someone who sits down and they just write and see where it goes. I am definitely a pantser. I'm about as much of a pantser as anyone can possibly be. So I had no idea where this story was going from start to finish. It was actually an adventure for me to write it, just as much as for anyone to read it. So yeah, I just thought it was going to be a standalone book, and it just didn't turn out that way. Just one thing led to another, and it might possibly have a cliffhanger ending that I did not intend.
Now, tell me, when you go to, you say you just sit down and just start writing, do you have a special place or special, a lot of authors, when I talk to them, they say, I do writing, or I write, in my book, in my study, or some of them have a coffee shop. Do you have a special place where you're in a zone when you're writing, or just kind of anywhere?
I can write just about anywhere as long as I have headphones. But I will say that for the most part, my books have been written at work where, again, I just didn't have anything else to do. It's not like I did not try. I really did ask. And, it just, for whatever reason, there was not enough to do. And so I would fill my time writing. So, yeah, it was usually at my desk.
Okay. Mm-hmm. So tell us a little bit about, the characters in this series. Just kind of tell us a little bit about, how you develop the characters in this series.
Yeah, so once again, Sabrina, the main character, she is definitely based off of me. I changed her hair color and I changed her eye color and I gave her a set of wings. But other than that, her personality is very much my own. She's probably the only character I have ever created who takes on my snarkiness and my sense of humor and such. As for everyone else, though, except for, I did try basing Sabrina's best friend off of a combination of my 2 best friends, and yet Deanda just basically took on her own personality, and so she's really not much like either of them, I would say. The only other character that I really based off of someone, and very successfally too, was one of my villains, actually. And that was off of someone who I knew back in college and stayed friends with for several years after. And he was such a fascinating person. I mean, very engaging, very intelligent, but also very manipulative. And so he just made such a great caricature for this particular character.
Okay. Now, this person who will remain unnamed, do they know that they're the villain in your book, or?
No, he has no idea whatsoever. I almost would love to tell him because I have a critique group who is critiquing my current book number 5, Flights of Fancy, right now, and they all said, "Oh my word, I really like this villain. He's so interesting." It's like, yeah, that's because I had great material to work off of. But yeah, he has no idea whatsoever.
Now, is it so close to his real personality that if he were to read this book, he'd be like, "Hey, wait a minute, this sounds like me"?
I think he would, yes.
Oh, wow.
Which is dangerous. I completely and totally acknowledge, but it was too much fun not to do. I really enjoyed myself.
Hey, I mean, you have to, use the things that are around you, the things in your own world. And if someone has a really unique personality, if they will make a good villain, why not? Which of your characters in this series did you have the most fun writing?
Once again, I would have to say that comes down to my villains. I mean, I loved every single one of my characters. I kind of have to like the main character, obviously, but, the love interest who comes into it and family members and the best friend. But I do have to say that the villains took me on some particular journeys and philosophical musings, I suppose, that were just very interesting to explore.
Wow, it sounds like you really like writing about just villains in general.
I like writing in general, but let's face it, when you're writing a novel, you're probably going to have a villain. They're a very, very integral part of your story. They're what drive the main character along. So I do think that you have to work pretty hard to make them engaging and interesting and just, as intriguing as possible.
Well, there are some books out there where they're a villain, but you're like, I kind of like this villain.
Yes.
And you see it in movies and stuff. You're like, I really like that villain. It's just, I guess it's just kind of like the way literature goes sometimes. Now, when you're writing and let's say from time to time you experience writer's block, like how do you get past writer's block? Because I know obviously all authors at some point, hit that obstacle. How do you deal with writer's block?
Normally, I am very blessed. I almost never do struggle with writer's block, but yes, it definitely does hit sometimes. And there are so many different ways to get past writer's block or over it or around it. One of my favorite ways is to go off and give myself a break and just eat some chocolate. Chocolate really does work.
Oh, chocolate solves so many problems. I mean, it's just like, the medicine that kind of cures a lot of things. So you have 5 books in a series, and you say your 5th book is coming out later this year.
Yes, hopefully. The whole entire manuscript is written, and actually, I suppose the 3rd draft is complete, but it's with one of my critiquers at the moment, and she's going through it, and she will tell me what works and what really needs improvement.
Okay. Now, when you, and we're going to get into a little bit about your business, but as a writer, when you get critiqued, how do you take it? Some writers really don't like anyone critiquing their books. How do you take critique?
I think that critiquing is such a very important part of the writing process. I will say this from personal experience and also seeing so many other writers deal with this. Self-editing is very difficult. It is one of the most difficult processes ever because we as the writers know exactly what we want to put down. And so we're in our own heads and we see what we see down on paper and we go, oh yeah, this works. I mean, maybe I want to change that little word or, maybe, that sentence structure needs to be altered. But overall, we see a pretty decent picture. And then, we turn it over to someone else and they might have a completely different perspective on it and different interpretations. Because let's face it, the English language is extremely complicated in both amazing ways and in some rather challenging ways as well. And so it's so important to get feedback. Now, I'm not going to say that I've never gotten offended from the feedback that I have gotten, especially my editor, my main editor. She is amazing. And I love her. She is actually my older sister, and she is so intelligent and so brilliant. But at the same time, she is so thorough. So sometimes I don't like her very much. But at the same time, I will tell you this, that as much as I might get irritated with her critiques, I take, 85% of them easily just because she's right. And here she is coming at it from a different perspective. And she's bringing in a new analysis that's really important.
Right. I mean, I think that is important. I think it's great to have somebody that has those type of skills that can go over your work with a fine-tooth comb, which is one of the reasons why I'm working with you. I had briefly flirted with the idea of self-editing, and I kind of looked at it, I was like, yeah, this looks pretty good. And then I gave it to you, and you gave it back to me like, yeah, I definitely need an editor. So, yeah, it is very important in the whole process. Now, obviously, you've written 4 books. You got your 5th one coming out. Actually, you've written 10 books, but you have your 5th book coming out in this series. Is it true that you not only write your own books, but you help people write them as well?
Yes, that is correct. Back in 2013, I started my innovative editing business as just a side job at that point, and it was because I talked to so many creative writers. Inevitably, I would get into a conversation with a new acquaintance, and hobbies would come up, and so I would mention, oh yeah, I like to write my own stories, novel-length manuscripts. And they would get so exceptionally excited. Their eyes would light up and they'd lean forward, not because they cared at all about my stories, but because they had their own story ideas in their mind that they were just so thrilled to share with someone else. And so they would tell me about these intriguing plots and vivid characters and just really great ideas until I would get really excited about what they were talking about. And so I would inevitably ask them, so how far along in the story are you? And then all of a sudden, their attitudes would completely and totally change. And they'd kind of, tap their foot against the floor and stare off into the ceiling, or at some point that it was not me. And they'd go, well, I haven't actually started it yet. It's still a work in progress in my head. And I'm going, but what you just said was so well thought out and so detailed, so why aren't you starting it? And so I came to the conclusion that there are usually a couple different reasons why people do not start these story ideas, even though, they are concentrating on them so hard. Number one, they don't have the right amount of encouragement. Number two, they don't think they have the time to actually sit down and write it. Mm-hmm. Or number three, they don't think that they have the guidance and the tools in order to do it. And so that is what innovative editing is all about. It is about, helping people to find the time, to find the skill set, and also to find some encouragement that, yes, you actually can do this. You just need to practice it. And again, never perfect it. That's kind of impossible, but get stronger at it until you are confident enough to put that out to the world and let other people see it.
So innovative editing is more than just editing. You basically coach aspiring writers through the entire process.
Yes, yeah, it depends on where they are and what they're looking for. It is very, very client, very creative writer centric. So if they do need coaching, if they need, brainstorming ideas, so they are starting off right at the beginning and they just have some semblance of a novel or a nonfiction book that they want to write, then I'll sit down with them and I will actually help them think it all through and figure out what kind of course they want to set. If they've already written a whole entire manuscript and, they want some guidance on editing it, I can step in there also. And if it is a complete manuscript, then I will look that over also and, tell them, okay, this is where it really is so strong. You did a great job. And over here, I think you need a little bit more setting detail, or this dialogue is not coming across as realistically as it could. And so I'll help them with that whole process and then even give them some publishing guidance in the end.
Now, when you say publishing guidance, do you basically give them counsel with regards to whether or not they should traditionally publish or they should self-publish?
Yes, yeah. So there are so many questions when it comes to the publishing route. Whether you want to self-publish or whether you want to try to get a literary agent or a small publishing company, what is a query letter, which is basically what you need to send out to literary agents or publishing companies when you're trying to get someone to say, ooh, I want to sponsor that book. So I basically walk them through the whole entire process, because while I personally am self-published, I have gone through the query letter back and forth myself many, many times, so I do understand it pretty well.
Yeah, I can imagine that's a pretty intimidating process, especially for a first-time writer, when you coach them through it and talking about the query letters and the literary agents. Mm-hmm. Do a lot of times when you're talking to an aspiring writer, they're like, yeah, maybe I should just go ahead and self-publish?
Normally, I think that writers have aspirations of, making it really big, of being the next J.K. Rowling or Stephen King or, David McCullough if they are writing nonfiction. And that's awesome. That's wonderful. I am not going to stifle that dream. At the same time, though, there's just a lot of information that they need to know in order to go for that dream. So what I usually coach people to do is, yes, go ahead and try to get a standard, traditional, publishing contract first. And if that doesn't work, and if you get sick of the query letter writing process, then in that case, start exploring self-publishing instead, because it actually is a rather legitimate means of publishing.
Now, I imagine is there a large kind of capital outlay with regards to self-publishing? I mean, should a person you need like X amount of thousands of dollars in the bank for printing and ISBN and stuff like that, or?
Yeah, okay, so there's a difference between self-publishing and vanity publishing, and that is also something that I stress. Self-publishing is when you actually do it yourself through the help of some company, such as I always go through Amazon's Create Space, which I really do value. They are very trustworthy. You can pay a lot for their services, but you can also do it completely for free, which is very nice. Vanity publishing, on the other hand, that is when you pay someone else probably a significant amount of money in order to, review your manuscript, bind it, print it, and possibly market it as well. And vanity publishers can be very, very predatory. I've met, unfortunately, very few who are not. So normally I do caution people to stay away from them.
Okay. Now, does it matter, and I don't know if anyone's ever asked you this question before, but does it matter the type of book with regards to, an author writing a book like, fantasy books, you should probably self-publish fantasy books, but, books about like engineering and mathematics, they're probably best done traditionally. Like, is there kind of like a general rule, or it just doesn't really matter?
Yeah, there are definitely genre-specific questions and concerns that come up regardless of what you're writing. But at the same time, I think that regardless, either traditional publishing or self-publishing is a viable option.
I see. So tell me a little bit about, some of your clients with regards to when you're editing their book. Have you ever had a client that, you did the edits and gave it back to them and they were like, I can't believe this, I think this is great. Have you experienced that before?
Normally, my clients are very, very happy. In fact, I have even been told before that I should charge more by clients who have already paid me, of course. Mm-hmm. But I've only ever had one client who was not a happy camper at the end. And he was writing, it was kind of fantastical, kind of post-apocalyptic. It was actually a very creative idea, but, I think that, again, self-editing can be very, very difficult, and so I don't think he quite grasped that and was not very happy with the results.
I see.
Other than that, I get to work with such amazing, amazing people and such great writers. Just for the record, you included.
Thank you.
I really did enjoy them.
You heard that, folks. Buy the book.
I'm going to be recommending that book as soon as it officially comes out, and I mean that. I don't say that lightly.
Great.
It's a great concept. But there's you. I have another client who has since published a dieting book, which, that does not sound very interesting at all, but she did such a great job tackling that idea from such a unique perspective. It's phenomenal. Her name is Karen Imhoff. I'm so bad at pronouncing her name. I can spell it, but pronouncing it, not so much. And it's called the Lost Weight Workshop. I'm working with a lot of other aspiring writers right now who are trying out, children's fiction, some rhyming books, and some other more novel-esque, theory, storylines and everything. And just working with these people, it just amazes me every time how creative the human brain really can be.
Oh, absolutely. Mm-hmm. The possibilities are endless. So as we wrap up here, I just wanted to see if you can give our viewers and our listeners a little piece of advice for those who are thinking about writing a book, but, haven't quite the courage to take that final step to start.
Okay. You know what? Just write. Just sit down and write. No one is going to look at that unless you, of course, give it to them. No one needs to look at it until you are completely and totally confident that, this is something that is interesting, that is engaging, and that's worth sharing. So the writing process, to begin with, it's just between you and yourself, and that is it. Therefore, you really should not be intimidated by your own opinion of yourself. So just go for it.
That's great advice. That's great advice. Jeanette, thank you so much for stopping by for Book Lovers Only Live Radio. We are happy that you are here. The series is Fairy Tales series. Her name is Jeannette DiLouie, and the first book is Not So Human. It is available on forbookloversonly.com. Please pick up a copy, and she also owns and runs Innovative Editing. So if you are thinking about writing a book and you need a great editor, she's your woman. You definitely need to hire her. Thank you, Jeanette. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you.
We're out of time, but be sure to join us next week when we will interview our call-in studio guest, Carol Tetlow from the United Kingdom, to discuss her books set in a family medical practice. It's pretty interesting stuff. My name is Rob Brown, your internet radio host and chief book lover, and this is For Book Lovers Only Live Radio, where if you love books, we have a home for you. Take care, and I'll see you next week.